Yeah, and we'll record this webinar for future reference. So if you know anyone who might be interested, you can refer them to that webinar. Yeah, just to let you all know that we do record our webinars for that purpose. We're really excited to have you all here today. My name is Joan Damerow, and I'm the community engagement lead for ESS-DIVE and a research scientist at Lawrence Berkeley Lab in the Climate and Ecosystem Sciences Division. And today I'll be presenting with Dylan O'Ryan, who has been working on some of this as well. And we're going to present some updates on specifically ESS-DIVE's work and contributions toward a broader effort for BER data integration, as well as some additional work that we started before then. So we'll start with just a high-level overview of some work we're doing in collaboration with the other BER data systems that I'll introduce in a moment, and that's being led by Kirsten Fagnan from JGI. And so this group is working towards some exciting capabilities on global search. And then we're going to talk a little bit more in this webinar about ESS-DIVE specific work on linking data sets to related research outputs and how to connect your data sets and papers through proper citations. If there's time, we can also talk about additional work that we've done on linking data at the sample level, but we may not have time for that in this webinar. So I wanted to just get an idea of people here today, if what your experience is, and if you've used other BER data resources or other related data resources, and you can select all that apply. And if you don't know what these are, then I assume you haven't used them. You can just select the ones that you've used and list others, like Zenodo or whatever else you be using for your data management publication and analysis, and you can list those in the chat. And Dylan will put the link to this poll question. Okay, so it seems like more for ESS-DIVE and JGI. I know some of our participants in our use cases have also used NMDC, EMSL, and KBase. And I'll talk about what these are in a moment. I just wanted to get an idea of what people's experience is and what data systems are using. Is there anything in the chat on that? I'm not seeing the chat myself right now. Let's see. Okay, well, we have ESS-DIVE and JGI, and I'll since I'm not seeing any more responses, I may move on to the next slide. Okay, so in addition to ESS-DIVE that you all know as part of the ESS-DIVE community and visiting our webinar today, there are other BER data systems, including the National Microbiome Data Collaborative, or NMDC, and this enables discovery and access to microbiome data and submission and storage of standard sample metadata and data products. There's the Environmental Molecular Sciences Laboratory, or EMSL, and this is a user facility for providing proteomics and metabolomics analyses and imaging. And then the Joint Genome Institute provides metagenomics and transcriptomics analyses. And the DOE Systems Biology Knowledgebase, or KBase, enables integrative analyses and workflows, among other useful tools for systems biology specifically. So these 5 BER data resources are collaborating to prototype a unified data access layer And the current goal for this is to enable global search that's supported by common APIs to find and reuse data. So the group working on this is, like I mentioned, is being led by Kirsten Fagnan from JGI, and it includes representatives from all of these BER resources, including specific teams for user research and engineering work. So we wanted to just really call out like all of these contributions. There were additional people involved as well. Everyone's really excited about this collaboration. So the team now has conducted 2 codeathons where developers from each resource work together to query our APIs and search for data across the different systems, and to harmonize queries across common fields like the latitude and longitude, keywords, ORCIDs for people, PIs, and citation information. And so this image is showing a proof of concept mapping that they developed, that they worked on recently, showing geolocated data across all of the BER resources. So you can zoom in to see, the idea is that you can zoom in to see specific data from the different resources in one map, and find and have a way to search for potentially relevant data by location to start with. And then in addition to this, there's a user research team being led by Steve Wilson at JGI. And this group has conducted 2 rounds of user interviews with scientists across BER that have user managed data with the different data systems. And the questions are focused on current processes for data use, management, and sharing. We had a couple different rounds of interviews focused on those topics. And Kirsten is actually going to present a more detailed updates in the BSSD PI meeting, which is happening in 2 weeks, I believe. If anyone knows the dates for that, maybe put it in the chat. And so, yeah, you can definitely find out more information on some upcoming meetings there. We wanted to inform everyone that this broader effort is taking place, and we are contributing to this, and I think there's going to be some exciting outcomes there. And there will be some additional user interviews. So if you're interested, you can use the QR code to sign up. The interviews take about 45 minutes. They are still looking for more ESS projects to contribute. So it'd be great to get some of your input on that as well. And if anyone else from the involved in this wants to add anything, please let us. You can speak up now.
Oh, yeah.
Here, we need to.
That is intended to.
Just stay on mute. I'll just pause for a second in case anyone has something to add about this broader effort or. Kristen, did you have something? Or... Okay.
Oh, no, sorry.
No problem. Okay, if no one has anything to add, I'll move on. So now for the majority of the webinar, what we wanted to do is discuss some different but highly complementary work that we started a little bit before this broader effort kicked off. So in late 2023, we had a workshop session on needs for connecting related data across BER systems, and wanting to get a group together to work through some use cases for how we might connect ESS-DIVE datasets to related research outputs. So what this, again, this was started before this BER-tron effort and is more ESS-DIVE focused, but we can use some of the conclusions and feedback on this to help inform the broader group when and where that's relevant. So I just want to make that clear as we get started with the rest of the webinar. So overall, as most of you know, ESS-DIVE supports the DOE's Environmental System Science program. So this includes highly interdisciplinary projects that are studying really interesting questions and on complex ecological and hydrobiogeochemical processes within watersheds, terrestrial ecosystems, and coastal and urban systems. And so for this type of work, the data and other research outputs are often highly connected to multiple related data sets and papers and other resources that might span across biological and environmental disciplines and other resources as well. So in this webinar, we want to discuss ways that we are addressing this issue through ESS-DIVE data set and even sample linking. But I think we're going to probably focus mostly on the data set linking at this stage. So to get started, ESS-DIVE has one of our planned milestones coming up is to enable automated metadata exchange to improve the discoverability of some of our environmental system science data. So this requires exchanging metadata using APIs and or programmatic data exchange protocols. And so to do this, we'll be mapping and harmonizing metadata across some of our systems and have agreed to work specifically with ARM and NMDC to start. So the idea is that we can create metadata-only data sets on ESS-DIVE that make the data discoverable in one place, all this ESS data, so that you can discover everything on ESS-DIVE, and then link to records, for example, at NMDC and ARM, if the data actually live there or in a related resource like JGI and EMSL from NMDC. So our approach here will involve identifying target data across systems and using these as examples to work through automating transfer and publication of this data. And it'll involve enhancements to ESS-DIVE's API and working through associated processes for managing dataset updates in this way. So this will be one way that we support linking and improve discovery across BER resources. Any questions or additions to that anyone has, just speak up. And if not, I'll just keep moving. So from the beginning, ESS-DIVE started meeting with individual projects, either one-on-one or through our annual community workshop, and also in meetings like the ESS Cyber Infrastructure and PI meetings. And in a lot of our conversations and like feedback sessions, we heard from people that they wanted to more easily see and access all of their related biological and environmental data for their projects and their data sets that they have on ESS-DIVE. For example, connecting related field to lab to model data. So this can include a variety of different data types like field samples, multi-omics data, remote sensing, model outputs, like raw and processed data, and the associated papers. So you can see how complex some of these are. And connecting this highly related data in a standard way can help make this kind of interdisciplinary data more discoverable, accessible, and reusable. So this is what is needed to enable things like provenance tracking to understand how data is processed and used over the data lifecycle. And it can also be a foundation for helping to enable more advanced search and integration. It's also critical for citations and credit that I'll talk about. Just to give you some more information on why we chose a certain standard approach for connecting data sets. So we go through the Department of Energy's Office of Scientific and Technical Information, or OSTI, which offers persistent identifier services to the DOE community and the US government. OSTI is a data site member, and DOIs assigned to data objects are always registered with DataCite to aid in citation and discovery and retrieval and reuse of this data. So DataCite represents a global organization and community with this broader goal to ensure that research outputs and resources are openly available and connected. They kind of specialize in that. So, and this helps promote reuse and advancing knowledge across and between disciplines. So the DataCite metadata schema provides, this is required for DOI registration. So we have our ESS-DIVE metadata, and then we map that to the higher level DataCite and OSDI metadata that is more the bibliographic information. And it also includes information on how to connect related resources. It's pretty simple, just providing a related ID, a relationship type, and a resource type. It can be as simple as just providing an identifier or a URL, and then some like key associated metadata on how that information is connected. So all DOIs registered through DataCite are then searchable in a DataCite Commons. This is a resource that you can use to search for high-level metadata, everything that has been registered through DataCite. And this can come from many different repositories. And so it can be one way to do a cross-repository data search, for example. So when this site connection metadata is provided, records in DataCite Commons then shows some useful metrics like citation counts. They can also provide a network graph that can look something like this image, depending on how much of that metadata that they have received. And it can connect a potentially rich variety of related resources. And then they also provide a list of titles and abstracts for all of those related resources. So you can see all the things that are connected to a particular data set through DataCite Commons. And this kind of related identifier and relationship metadata can be provided by any repository that registers this kind of metadata. So we want to start doing this for ESS-DIVE. We aren't currently, and I'll explain a little bit more about this as we go on and show you an example. So DataCite also is one of the major players in getting our data citation metrics or citation counts for our data sets. And this figure shows how this is done. So DataCite registers DOIs across all data repositories like ESS-DIVE. Researchers then cite and other data and other research outputs in their publication references lists using the DataCite DOIs, ideally. The data repository can then, like ESS-DIVE, can then update DataCite metadata and include DOIs of any related publications or resources. And certain relationship types then register those as a citation. So even data sets can cite things, and we can start contributing to the citation counts and records of how things are connected. The connections between DOIs are collected and stored in DataCite, and then new researchers can then discover data and other research outputs and connections between DOIs in discovery systems like DataCite Commons that I mentioned, and I'll show you an example on the next slide. And citation metrics are then harvested, and this enables repositories and DataCite Commons to display the number of citations and links to things that are cited on their landing pages. And this is just an example of an environmental system science data set viewed in DataCite Commons. So this DOI was registered through ESS-DIVE, but you can also view the basic metadata in DataCite Commons, and it'll show, right, it'll show the connection between the DataCite and the journal articles and anything else that's been registered with related IDs and relation types. And then it'll also show a list of all of those related works with the title, and then it also shows the abstract and the very high level metadata about it. And so you can visit those, that they link out to the actual resources themselves. Are there any questions on that? Or additions, if folks from OSTI have anything to say? Okay, I'll move on then. So we wanted to test out using the data site related identifiers and to see how we could apply that to specific environmental system science projects. And so we worked with several projects to determine how their interdisciplinary ESS-DIVE datasets are connected to related research outputs. And so we ended up working so far with 6 projects. This included 20 data sets. These have all been published and are collected into a data portal that you can view. We have a link here so you can kind of explore what we did there. What we added so we currently have in ESS-DIVE a field called related references where you can list references. They aren't like structured in this like specific metadata with the related identifier and the relation type. It's just a text block kind of that shows, it provides a way for you to list references. And what we want to do is implement a more structured approach where we collect that specific information and send it to OSTI and DataCite so that we have those connections preserved and available in resources like DataCite Commons. So yeah, we worked with these projects to update their data site, their ESS-DIVE data set metadata with these references. So as I mentioned before, this started in late 2023 where we had a workshop session on this topic and we coordinated and planned our approach with several ESS projects and also members of all the other BER data systems that we've discussed. And we'll continue that as we move forward so that we have where everyone's aware of what we are doing and we can coordinate on potential approaches to connect data. And then we really want to highlight the ESS project members who worked with us on the real use cases to add these related resources to their dataset landing pages. So we met with them over an iterative process to walk through their datasets and the key related resources. We reviewed options for representing how the different resources were connected, and then also discussed, worked with them to approve and then publish their final updated related references and their data sets. So I want to call out here that we really appreciate our early adopters of this work and like all of our community reporting formats. They're really essential for helping us make our data more discoverable and usable and really help drive the development of the tools to make this easier and more rewarding for future researchers. So thank you again for people who are contributing to this. So we're connecting related project data for different types of studies. And these are kind of the themes that came out as we were working through this. We generally need to consider components of a data set, things like sites and samples that are addressed in the data set. We also have general related information like the references. Data synthesis studies are one important way that we need to track relationships and cite the original source data. And then we have these complex modeling, observation, experimentation studies, or MODEX. That's a hallmark in ESS science. And then there's a lot of interdisciplinary sample work across the BER systems. Many of them, like JGI and EMSL, are store data often at the sample level. And so we have these highly interdisciplinary sample data. And common ways that we found as we were exploring these different themes that data are connected are by project, sites, and samples, the associated journal article, just general references to things like related data sets and workflows and journal articles. We see data derived from a data set or child data sets, and source data, and to specify original sources for data sets. And again, what this does is help us track provenance and citations, and enable things like automated metadata exchange. And we'll walk through these different themes and connections. So as we work through the different themes, these were kind of, we wanted to come up with some intuitive categories, and we also looked at other environmental data repositories to see how they were representing some of these. And so the general categories we came up with were, I kind of mentioned some of these. They're listed here: the components of a data set, associated journal articles, references, source data, and derived data. And this is, this slide is summarizing how we would use the related identifiers. And all of these, we're talking about linking our ESS-DIVE data set, so the data set DOI, and then we provide a specific relation type that's relevant there, and then the related resource. And so we're documenting all of these in a master spreadsheet so that we can then, once we finalize and get feedback from projects and the other BER data systems, we finalize these and we can send this metadata to OSTI and DataCite. So we have those available in the DataCite records for provenance tracking. So I'm going to pass it over to Dylan, who did a lot of the work here on working with projects on adding related references.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. So I'll go through the next few slides that discuss the themes more specifically. And so the first theme, as mentioned by Joan, is components of a data set. And components of a data set are often information included in data sets already, such as sites and samples, of which we have existing reporting formats that describe these components and standard metadata. And importantly, these components are often connection points to other resources, data sets, and systems. So they're important to catalog and register as references within data sets. And so first, external linking. And next, Joan, are formal links used to connect data files and metadata stored in other repositories to ESS-DIVE datasets. And so as shown in this top screenshot here is an example from the Watershed Function SFA project. And this data set includes external links to visible to shortwave infrared data on Google Earth Engine. And so these links are important for relating the resources that contain data associated with the ESS-DIVE dataset. And in this case, the ESS-DIVE dataset is linking to an original source of the data stored on Google Earth Engine. Next, sites can also serve as a connection point across datasets and systems. And so in the second screenshot, there's an example from the River Corridor SFA project, which collected samples across 48 globally distributed rivers, or 48 rivers across North America. And so this reference here is referring to the standardized metadata file describing these 48 sites contained within this data set. And then lastly is samples can also be a common connection point and are described with the samples reporting format. And we'll be discussing this more in theme 5. Next. The second theme is general related information, which is critical for finding and accessing additional contextual information and related data to ESS-DIVE datasets. And importantly, these connections are critical for tracking citation metrics. And in general, ESS-DIVE datasets often have some general related information. And for our 20 use case datasets, all datasets had some general related information. And so an example shown at right is an example dataset from the SLAC Groundwater Quality SFA project, which contains time series data from groundwater and surface water samples. And so general related information can include first, the associated journal articles for papers of which the dataset was originally created for, and additional references to related datasets, journal articles, and study registrations, such as those on NMDC and JGI, are important for providing additional contextual information about the dataset. And so an example here, references to related datasets were included, such as those datasets that were collected from the same field season or the same field site. Next. So the third theme is related to data synthesis studies. And data synthesis studies often compile data from various sources and often from a large number of sources, individual sources, in which tracking provenance of data and attribution is really critical. And so the example shown at right is from an ESS synthesis project that is focusing on synthesizing tropical root characteristic data, such as root biomass and root dynamics from 104 papers that are described within this data set in ESS-DIVE. And so the source data, in this case from journal articles, but can more broadly be from other data sets or other data systems, is cited within the related references field. Next. And so citing, as mentioned, citing this source data is really critical for tracking provenance of data and formally crediting the synthesized data sources. And so in this example, with over 100 different individual data sources, citing each paper within the related references field was impractical and would result in a lengthy dataset landing page. And so we reference a file that has the information on all of these sources, and then we record the citation by providing, and then we'll record the citation by providing related identifiers to Austein DataCite for all 104 journal articles. Next. So I think I'll just quickly pause to see if anyone has any questions before I go into the next, the following themes.
I had a quick question about in terms of like you're pointing to that like kind of source file that contains all those subsequent citations that contributed to the database. Is there like an automated way that you're extracting that, or you have to manually pull those out to like create those relationships that you send to Austein?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right now it's manual, but that's our next step, and we'll talk about that in our conclusions and a next step slide. But our next step is figuring out like a plan for implementing these related identifiers as we move forward and having a more automated way and to collect that information either in our submission form or through using our reporting formats. So that's kind of the current plan. It's manual right now, but we'll be working on improvements.
Oh, thanks.
Joan, or Dylan, on the slide before, I think, when you were talking about referencing that one source with all the 104 papers, what is included in that synthesized data set? Is it just a table of it? I mean, the data set file is just a list, so you're calling it a database.
I'm Dylan.
Yeah, and I think Amanda may be here today, so she can add in as needed. But my understanding is that the database file contains all of the like synthesized data, but then it also contains the specific journal articles and source article information within that file. But Amanda, if you're on, maybe, and if you want to add on, feel free.
Hey, Dylan, yes, you are correct. So it includes all the information about the citations per se, and also the data set from, and this was data that were extracted by hand from all these different papers, or if they had a data set from ESS-DIVE, for example, we would also grab some data from ESS-DIVE. So yeah, but that's it. Yeah, if you have more questions, let me know.
Thank you.
Okay. Hearing there are no more, if anyone else has any further questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat and we can address them later on as we go. So the fourth major theme that emerged from our use case work is the MODEX, or Model Observation and Experiment Studies, which Joan mentioned a little bit earlier. It is really a hallmark of DOE ESS research and the projects. And so tracking related works and resources related to these MODEX workflows and studies, such as sites, samples, general related information and references, as well as data types such as sensor and remote sensing data, as well as data derived from the data set and source data, are really important in making these studies more fair and reproducible. And so the example shown at right is from the River Corridor SFA project. And the dataset describes their CONUS scale model sample study that is examining hyporheic zone respiration rates to improve modeling at the CONUS scale. And so this study leverages machine learning models to guide the sampling efforts. And so in this dataset and study, there are 145 sites and 479 samples across the United States. And Joan, if you could advance, which are described in the sites in this data set and samples within this data set sections within the related references field. And these are components of the data set. And then further, there are source data from EMSL that make up a component of this data set and are referred to within this field, or within this section. Next. And so the last theme that emerged from our use cases is on interdisciplinary samples. And so these interdisciplinary sample studies often have related analyses and research outputs across the ER systems, such as NMDC, JGI, and EMSL. And so that we found specific to our use cases that at the data set level, we can connect to JGI award DOIs and NMDC study pages as references. And then more often, EMSL data is used and incorporated as source data within some of our data sets, and as such would be listed as source data. And so the example shown at right is from the Compass FME Research Projects Exchange campaign, which comprises a consortium of scientists that are looking at improving the understanding of exchange of water between estuaries and lakes and a terrestrial landscape surface. And so this data set contains soils, sediments, and water characterization data. And in this study, they collected 880 individual samples and were described and registered for IGSNs, or International Generic Sample Numbers, through CSAR and our ESS-DIVE sample metadata template. And then the samples underwent analysis at EMSL, which are described as source data. Joan, if you could advance in the source data section, and then are described in the associated journal articles, which are also included within the related references field. Next. And so, as Joan mentioned a few slides ago, these use cases can cross many of the themes, and the themes aren't mutually exclusive of one another. And so many, data set can have many different related resources that are important to track and reference within a data set. And so this example here is from the River Corridor SFA project as part of their Wonders Summer 2019 sampling campaign. where samples were collected from 97 globally distributed river corridor systems. So this data contains sediment data from sediment samples. And as this study is sample-based, samples are described using the samples metadata reporting format and are registered for IGSNs and described within the samples within this dataset section. Papers that are using the data contained within the ESS-DIVE dataset are cited as associated journal articles, and references to related datasets, such as the accompanying Wonders water sample dataset and JGI metagenomes and metatranscriptomes data are included as related datasets within related references field. Next. And next is references to study registrations such as JGI award and NMDC study pages, in addition to workflows such as KBase data. And so these are included within the workflows and study registrations sections, which are important to link the related data on the various BER data systems that are associated with the ESS-DIVE dataset. General references to journal articles which do not use the data contained within ESS-DIVE are included as general references to journal articles. And then datasets which contain derived data can be listed as related resources. And so in this case, there were child datasets that use data contained within the primary or parent dataset in ESS-DIVE. And they are linked, which is important for provenance tracking of data. And then lastly, any source data that should be listed should be listed within the dataset itself. And for example, this was using EMSL, using data that was analyzed by EMSL. So we have, so we've kind of discussed the themes and categories, and we kind of just want to gauge the audience here to understand what kind of themes and categories you all may want to use for your related your datasets on ESS-DIVE. So you can thumbs up any of these categories, or perhaps add in anything into the chat if you don't see one that is applicable to your research.
I think you can also add things in here and people can upvote it. So if you have something else, I think you can add it directly in here.
Yeah, thanks everyone for thumbsing up the categories. Yeah, it would make sense that general references and associated journal articles might be the most applicable, at least from what we found in our use cases thus far. But great to see that there are some examples for child and derived data, as well as source and components of data sets. Okay, so I guess I just want to quickly pause to see if anyone has any questions regarding the themes and categories we presented thus far before we kind of walk through some next steps. And also invite any of the projects that have contributed to this work if they want to add in any details or any insights that they may want to share. Okay, well, yeah, if anyone has any questions that they feel free to add it in the chat. So up to this point, as Joan mentioned kind of a little bit earlier today, we've included standard related references within 20 datasets on ESS-DIVE as part of our use case work, and have published an accompanying related identifiers portal that comprises all of these use case datasets. And we've also recorded and compiled the standard metadata for updating OSTI and DataCite, as Joan showed earlier for these use cases. And so for our next steps, we're planning to send the related ID and connection metadata to OSTI and DataCite so that the connections are shown within the DataCite commons landing pages that Joan showed. And we're also working to create an implementation plan for collecting dataset metadata within the submission form and landing pages and datasets on ESS-DIVE. And so we're hoping to get some feedback on this and be able to coordinate with other BR data systems on standard identifiers that should be used. And lastly, if you're interested in adding related works and related identifiers to your data set, please reach out to us and we're happy to work through your use cases. Next. So in summary, linking data sets to related resources are important for automating metadata exchange across ESS-DIVE, the other BR data systems, as well as more broadly, for example, at DataCite and OSTI. And so this really allows us to improve citation counts and be able to more efficiently see and track all the places data is being used. And so importantly, linking datasets to related resources are critically important in making interdisciplinary datasets more discoverable so that you can find related data, accessible so that related works can be accessed with clear links. This also can improve reusability of these datasets and research, as reuse often relies on more contextual and granular information, such as processing information that may not necessarily be described within a dataset, but can be found within related resources. And lastly, this can make the research and datasets more reproducible. Next.
Yeah, so again, like if you have questions, feel free to bring those up. And if not, I'll move on to some information about citing data. So we wanted to point out that it's really important to cite data in your papers. And this includes providing information on the data used within the data availability statement, which is now required for many or even most journals, and citing that data in the references section as a formal citation. And so ESS-DIVE makes this easy. First, we do show citation metrics and downloads and views on our dataset landing pages. So you can see that information that has been recorded that way as citations. We also make it easy to find the citation. We have a Cite This Dataset button on the ESS-DIVE landing page that'll provide a formatted citation that you can use in your papers and copy that if needed. You can, if you find that something you've cited, so we do see that data citations are not always reported, or it doesn't always make it back to the information associated with the data set. They don't always show up as citations. So if you find that a paper has cited your data set and it's not showing up in the citations, you can also you can view what citations your data set has, and there's a register citation button where you can add that information, and then it'll subsequently show up on your data set landing page and be registered as a citation. So you can choose, like, the publication cites this data set or uses this data set if it actually wasn't cited, but it did use. Sometimes we find that the citation didn't end up in the paper. So you can correct that within your so that it'll show up on the citations. But the downside is if it wasn't cited in the paper originally, it's not going to be easy for someone reading the paper to find that associated data, if that makes sense. And this is an example of a good data availability statement that includes both biological and environmental data. So you can see that an NCBI bioproject accession number was referenced in the availability statement, and there's an additional file that includes like more sample level and analyses accession numbers. And then they also reference an ESS-DIVE data set and have a link there. And there's a formal reference, this number here, in the references section. And so that's going to get recorded in the citation metrics. And so that's why it's important to list all of the data included in your availability statement and provide some information on that, and as well as citing it as a formal citation in the references section. So we wanted to end with some key takeaways here. Our overall goal is to make interdisciplinary environmental system science data sets more findable and accessible and reusable by connecting our related resources. So ESS-DIVE can contribute to this by reporting related IDs to DataCite, and this helps improve citation counts, and it can contribute to this network graph of related research outputs. Projects can contribute by listing related resources in their data sets. And again, you can email us to work with us on including your use case, your data set use case. You can also use ESS-DIVE standard reporting formats, specifically file level metadata, which we didn't talk about today, but if you're interested, reach out to us and we could give you some more information. And also the samples and locations reporting format, because these are common identifiers, as we've mentioned, that people are using to connect related data across different data sets and systems. Also, citing data in your paper data availability statement and in the references section. And then we've also done a lot of work at connecting data at the sample level. We don't have time to talk about that today. Maybe we can have another webinar. For this, it's important to provide a source sample, IGSN ID, according to our samples reporting format, to all of the resources involving that sample, like ESS-DIVE, JGI, EMSL, and NMDC. So I'll just mention that, and if you're interested, we do have slides on it. We can discuss that with you, and we may have a future webinar on that as well, because we've done a lot of work around that. So with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions or feedback. We would love to hear any feedback you have on this approach, or if you have suggestions, it'd be great to hear. Oh, Terry?
Yeah, I know we were trying to do those relationship types a while back when Osti brought them out, and then there was the related identifier field, two separate ones. But I know Osti did have, or may still have, a really long list of relationship types, and it looks like you're choosing the best of those.
Yeah,
Just wonder, yeah. It's not the long list. I don't know that we still have any that were left over in our records at Osti or not. And if we still have projects that are creating data sets through eLink, if they start implementing that, they should restrict them to the options that ESS-DIVE is going to have and not choose from those others.
Well, I mean, this is what was coming up and what seemed to make sense for our projects that we worked with, and from our experience with environmental system science projects, but there may well be others. And also, yeah, we may find additional ones would be useful too, but we did find it to be a bit confusing to choose from those. And so we thought it would, and also got feedback from that on our project, from the projects that were contributing to this. And so our conclusion was that it was better to kind of restrict it to the main ones that people are using, but we may want to have some sort of way people could provide additional related identifiers as well. But if anyone has feedback on that or thoughts on additional relation types or resource types that are relevant, that would be good to know.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it in a while, and I see Liz is saying, yeah, it's very long. But and then I was completely confused because I remember asking people at OSTI, and then I had to make a little sheet to remind myself as to what the relationships. So anything clear or narrow down is fine.
June, there's a question in the chat from Corey Levinson.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Are you all connecting with any of the NOAA marine data set repositories?
Yeah, this is less experimental data, right? But it's from like ships that are just running all the time. But it's another data set that in theory would be great to have, you know, defined and accessible in a way that's like interoperable with all the experimental stuff that you all are more engaged with. I'm just curious if you're looking to connect to those sorts of data sets as well. Doesn't fit quite the same typology of like, oh, it's a data set with a journal article and da-da-da-da, but it is like, it's a lot of environmental data.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with that, but I mean, we definitely want to connect with any related data sets for ESS, you know, things published in ESS-DIVE, which is, you know, generally restricted to environmental, you know, projects funded by the Environmental System Science Program. Does
Yeah,
anyone?
so I think,
Yeah.
but these are not, I think, well, they're not initiatives or projects. This is like, there are ships that are going out doing hydrographic, you know, data collection on a repeated basis, used a lot for climate models.
Mhm.
And it's not like, oh, it's a specific experiment with a PI who's doing a research thing. It's like, these are just continuous variables that are taken on cruises every, you know, week, month or something.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that data sets could definitely reference it as a, you know, related reference. And then, yeah, if, but otherwise I'm not that familiar with it.
So if it's not in the ESS-DIVE world, then it's sort of out of the purview of what like
Yeah, unless
the
it's
project that you
somehow
guys are
like
working on is.
associated or relevant for a specific project in their data set.
Makes sense. Cool.
Any other questions or feedback? We have about a minute, or I guess we're about out of time. Well, thank you all for joining. It's great to see you, and yeah, if you do have any feedback that you think of at a later time, let us know. We'd be happy to work with you on your data sets as well.